The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit and I'm welcoming you here as we celebrate the 9th anniversary of this program. We are over the moon that we made it 9 years here. Unfortunately, I have no one to celebrate with, so it's you and me having some fun talking about a bunch of movies, some really wild movies, some fun ones, some tragic ones. But that's what this show is all about, talking about movies and hopefully recommending some for you. So let's get right into it because I've got a lot on the slate this week. I'm going to start, of course, what we have on the marquee. The first film I'm starting with is one that was on my most anticipated list at the beginning of the year. It is the newest film from director Ari Aster. It is called Beau is Afraid. Ari Aster, if you don't know, he's one of A24's stars. He made Hereditary, Midsommar, some of my favorite movies of the last decade. And this one feels much more like a passion project, something that kind of needed to be put on the screen for him personally. It's a story about parental guilt, repressed sexuality, stunted adolescence, all told through the lens of an insane black comedy. And it's all about Beau. Beau is played in this movie by Joaquin Phoenix. And really, Beau is afraid of the world in this film. Beau Wasserman, he's kind of a bit of a sad sack. You see him here, terrified of the world around him. And this world changes constantly throughout the film. But one thing remains constant, and that is that Beau is terrified of his mother, yet dependent on her for everything. He's a son who, in her mind, he can never repay his mother for what she's done for him, and he'll always be seen as ungrateful for all the caring that she's done to him. And he's a guy who's buried under guilt and shame by his mother. The basic story of this film, and this is, I don't know how to summarize this film because it's crazy, but the basic story is Beau is planning on going to visit his mother, but before he can even get to the airport, the world starts throwing everything it has at him and just prolongs and creates this torturous journey for this man. He's a man who can't have a normal relationship with any woman that he comes across, as his mother issues always rear their ugly head. And this film starts to really break down into several very distinct sections, each inhabiting a different type of world. You've seen here dark worlds, you've seen animated worlds, all kinds of crazy things, but very different people in each world that he wanders into. First, it's the neighborhood around his apartment, which looks like it's something from The Purge. Just a wild scene outside his apartment complex. And inside, his apartment complex is filled with things and people that are trying to kill him and at minimum drive him mad. This leads to him suddenly waking up in a suburban home, which is inhabited by a couple who outwardly appear normal. This couple, Grace and Roger, played by Amy Ryan and the great Nathan Lane, respectively. But we see, of course, that normal suburbia is terrifying, as he discovers that this family of pill poppers has no intention of making his journey easy at all. This tension continues until there's a brilliant bit in the middle as he stumbles across this theatrical collective putting on a play out in the middle of the woods. There's a beautiful bit of storytelling in here that adds in some animation to really flesh it out. And this is the one part of the movie that I started to feel sure-footed with, because it stopped and told this really beautiful story. But, of course, everything in his life is punctuated by violence, even in the most beautiful parts. I don't want to give away a whole lot more. It's a 3-hour film. I'm probably halfway through it with my review, so I don't want to give away a whole lot more, but the final chapter of this film is the most insane of all, with performances by Parker Posey that I really dug, and a powerhouse performance by the great Patti LuPone as his mother, who comes in and just chews scenery. She's incredible in this. And also, there's something in the attic in this movie that I've never seen on film before, and I was not expecting. You need to see it in order to understand it. I think it's an intensely dark comedy. It's a dark comedy, a twisted drama. It's filled with tragedy. It's about a son who just never loved his mother enough. And it makes me wonder about Ari Aster's mental well-being. But so much of this film is just insanity going on, daring you to stay with it. And I know some people in the audience that I was in did not stay with this movie. They could not stay connected to it because it was just too crazy. I find it to be brilliant on so many levels, very different from any other film you'll see. I love and appreciate that Ari Aster, as a filmmaker, goes for it. He tells original stories. He doesn't half-step his vision. This felt like a passion project. He never holds the audience's hand and lead them along this journey. And Joaquin Phoenix is the definition of that quality in an actor, a guy who goes for it, whether he doesn't care what you think of it. He cares about what he feels. Both of them just take big swings, make weird choices, and don't play to the median audience in the crowd. They go for the people in the back, and they love being bold. And this movie gets you back on your heels immediately, and it's up to you to kind of catch up and stay recovered. Joaquin Phoenix, I think, is incredible in this. I love him in everything, but this, it feels like it's a quiet, anxiety-riddled performance until you start to realize that it's not really understated, that it's actually over the top in a weird, quiet way, which is really tough to pull off. And this film, this performance, everything about it gave me anxiety throughout the entire 3 hours. And I spent the majority of that 3 hour runtime really feeling off balance, unstable, unsure of what was going on. Several times in my notes, I wrote, I have no idea what's going on here. I don't know if I love this or hate this at this moment, because you're not sure what's going on and what's real or anything like that. But boy, they brought it all together at the end to save it for me. I absolutely, really, really adore this film. I highly recommend it. Take a chance on something weird. I give Beau is Afraid 4.5 out of 5 stars. Another great one from Ari Aster. Also on the marquee this week, I went and saw Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. This stars Jake Gyllenhaal as Sergeant John Kinley. It's a bit of a war film. After losing their translator in a roadside bombing, a U.S. military unit in Afghanistan, led by Sergeant John Kinley, must bring in a replacement translator. Ahmed, who's played by Dar Salim, is a man with a mysterious past and a knowledge of the local underworld. In fact, he used to work for the Taliban until they killed his son. And we see these interpreters and their families still live in the villages amongst these people. Some of them are seen as traitors, but they're promised special immigration visas in order to work for the U.S. military. And Ahmed he's strong-willed, but he understands the mission that they're out there for, and he proves his worth very early on. The unit is tasked with finding IED manufacturers, and this leads to a lot of frustration and building tension as they search fruitlessly for these guys, until one day they finally get good intel and a devastating battle ensues between the Taliban and this small unit led by Jake Gyllenhaal. It ends with John and Ahmed being on the run in the most rugged terrain with the Taliban pursuing them. And we're constantly reiterating in this movie that they can't use the roads. They got to take the most rugged path. The Taliban control the roads. We got to go through the mountains to get the 120 clicks back to the base in safety. And this gets ever more dramatic when John is shot multiple times and Ahmed must rescue him. And the journey becomes Ahmed's story of dragging this unconscious man through the mountains, keeping him alive somehow, some way. And we get what amounts to Rocky training montages as he does this, as he drags him through the mountains day after day. And his rescue of John makes both men huge targets for the Taliban. And when John returns home to safety, we know that because we see it in the trailer, he's astonished to learn that the U.S. government fell through on their promise to Ahmed and his family. So John feels like he has a debt to pay, a life debt that he swore to this man that he would get them to safety out of the country, to America. But he faces the real enemy in doing this, and that is government red tape, of course. We got a lot of scenes of him on the phone getting more and more frustrated and delusioned with what's going on. And this is where the film really starts to come off the rails for me. You begin to really feel the Guy Ritchie hand in this, and it felt like a heavy dose of Oliver Stone in the worst way, as we get slow-mo moments with dreamlike visuals set to orchestral music as Jake Gyllenhaal's character starts to get more and more frustrated with the bureaucratic red tape. it gets real hokey. And I kind of hate that part of the movie because it felt really corny and melodramatic with soaring strings and all the montages as he remembers what Ahmed did for him. And he's living with survivor's guilt, and that's a very real thing. So he takes matters into his own hands to find and rescue Ahmed before the Taliban finds and murders him and his family. And this is the covenant. This is the vow. This is the promise that he made. And the message within about how we treated these translators who risked their lives, their families' safety for the promise of freedom. It's a strong message in how we bailed out on them and we left so many behind to fend for themselves, and many have been murdered and many more are in hiding. It's the truth, and it's a sad truth. And unfortunately, the U.S. government does that a lot with promises. We have a tendency to do that. I thought the first half of this film was a tense, dramatic war film being embedded with this unit, and the second half of this film was pure Hollywood mumbo-jumbo, and it got real cheesy as it tried to ramp up the drama, unfortunately. And despite some solid performances and a beautiful-looking film, I ended up giving Guy Ritchie's The Covenant 3 out of 5 stars. It's good. It's good, but the second half really fell off in my mind. We have one other film here on the marquee. It's another film from the Wisconsin Film Festival. I saw this a couple of weeks ago. Really enjoyed it. It's a film called I Like Movies. This is from director Chandler Levac. It's 2002. It's Canada. We have two guys, Lawrence and Matt. Lawrence played by Isaiah Lettinen and Matt played by Percy Hines White. They are inseparable high school friends. They love making amateur movies together. They have a weekly tradition called Rejects Night where they watch Saturday Night Live together and have little routines they do to entertain themselves. Lawrence has a single dream. There he is right there. Lawrence has a single dream: to attend NYU Film School and become a great filmmaker. Matt is less focused, and that focus is pulled even further away by the cute girl in class who also has a talent with film and steals away the video yearbook project that Matt and Lawrence were supposed to do. And Lawrence, he's not too happy about all this, but his obsession with movies is real, and he's a guy who needs to watch a new movie every day or else he'll die. Boy, I feel this kid. But in order to save the $80,000 for college that he needs, he gets hired at the local video store, a store called Sequels in here. Lawrence is an incredibly socially awkward, incredibly selfish narcissist who hurts everyone around him. Everyone is hurt by his selfishness. He has outbursts with his mother, who does all she can for him. He flips out on his best friend, Matt. He flips out on Alana. Alana is his boss, but we'll get to her. And then after he has these freakouts, he plays the victim card when he's called on it. And he really doesn't care about anyone else but himself. And even in the most traumatic of times for himself or those around him in real trauma, his main concern is whether he's going to get his 10 free rentals from working at Sequels. He's a real horrible person. He's horrible to his mom. And kids are dumb at that age, and many are. And sadly, he sees her kind of as just a servant to him and his dreams. Make sure I get to NYU. And at its essence, it's a coming of age story, like so many classics of this genre about, a troubled young man who needs to learn some life lessons and before going off to college, whatever. I mentioned Alana, who was played by Romina Diogo. She is his boss at Sequels, and they have this weird relationship where she kind of serves as a mentor, but she also pushes back against him. And I like their relationship together because a big part of his growth is, and you staying invested in this story of this guy who really is unlikable, is thanks to Alana. And she's the one who calls him out for being a horrible person. She's got her own story, her own backstory about a tragic, short-lived Hollywood acting career that echoes far too many young actresses of this era of the late 1990s, early 2000s, unfortunately. But even as she's revealing her tragedy to Lawrence, he's really only concerned about how this affects him. And I found this to be a really hilarious, really sweet film. Gives you a lot of cringe chills, and if you're my age, probably floods you with a lot of memories of this time period. I related probably too much to A couple of characters in this film, Lawrence, a lot of Lawrence in me. It was hard to have that mirror held up to the young me. But Isaiah Lettinen is great in this film as Lawrence. There's moments where you despise him and you can't see why you should want him to get his dream. You want him to get anything but his dream. But the film is good enough and it's well written enough that you stick with him and stay invested in him. And I Like Movies is the name of the film. It's also his mantra. It's the only thing that he cares about in his life. And I think the strongest part of this film is his dynamic with he and Alana, the back and forth, the awkward teenage crush that he has on her, this woman who has lived his dream and gotten crushed in doing so. All of that works really wonderfully. The drawback is that the film starts out telling the Lawrence and Matt story, two best friends, the amigos. We see them doing the Rejects night together, all this stuff. And that was a lot of fun. I really liked their bond, and it felt familiar to me. But the Matt storyline really falls away maybe a third of the way into the movie. His storyline just kind of gets thrown off to the side. We don't see him for large chunks of the film. And I would have liked more of that. I thought that was a mistake. This film is just filled with nostalgia points for a certain generation, for film nerds that are obsessed with the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie. That's a big point in here is Punch Drunk Love is coming out. PTA and Adam Sandler doing his first dramatic role. And, people with an obsession for Saturday Night Live or the local video store. There's some great jokes in here from the video store manager about how, you could have a career here for the next 30 years. This place isn't going anywhere. Got a nice laugh out of the crowd. There's just so much I relate to, even some of the lesser traits of Lawrence that I saw in this film. And I really enjoyed it. The end let me down a little bit. I'm not going to tell you why, but the end let me down. I was a little bummed out by the end of it and how they decided to land this thing. But ultimately, I Like Movies is a film that, I really liked. And I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's a fun one. Like I said, it was showing at the Film Fest, so I'm assuming it'll be coming streaming shortly. So keep your eyes open for that. And if I see it coming, I will let you know in future episodes. Let's move ahead, though, to our streaming spotlight this week. And we turn to Apple TV Plus, I believe, for the first one. It's a film called Ghosted from director Dexter Fletcher. Stars Chris Evans as a man named Cole Turner. Cole is a local farmer who loves what he does, but he is unlucky in love. He's a sweet guy that everyone likes, which has served him well, especially one day at the farmer's market when he runs into this engaging young lady named Sadie, who's played by the lovely Ana de Armas. She is an international art curator who spends a torrid 24 hours together with Cole. And Cole is head over heels for this young lady. And when she doesn't respond to his obsessive texting and calling, he goes out to track her because he's a full-on weirdo. He's tracking her by tracking his inhaler. He left his inhaler in her purse. That's how we know that he's just a regular doof, because he's got an inhaler. But luckily, he put an Apple tag on his inhaler. Product placement for you not paying attention. Little Apple product placement. But he's tracking her using that Apple tag. And this brings him across the ocean to London, where he is promptly embroiled in way more than he ever expected. And we have a case of mistaken identity as all these bad guys think he's the tax man because he looks just like, or maybe they just assume he's the tax man who is a famous spy, hitman, secret agent, what have you. And he quickly figures out that this one-night stand crush is not an art dealer, but a covert operative. What? Yeah. He's caught up in assassination attempts, and it's assumed that he has the passcode to a briefcase that has the prize that one of the bad guys, Levesque, played by Adrian Brody, and others are after. And Cole is often the one in distress. He's the one tied to the train tracks as opposed to the damsel in distress here, as Sadie is the one who has to swoop in to save him. And these films, I feel like, are always a case of mistaken identity. We get that a lot. And Cole is set as like this, because it's Chris Evans. He's set as like this sweet guy, but he's a bit obsessive and possessive of a lady that he just met and tracks her and follows her halfway across the globe because she didn't answer the 70 text messages that he sent her after a one-night stand. And he's super clingy and kind of gross. And it's passed off as being sweet because it is, Captain America, but I had an issue with that. The climax is set in this CGI rotating restaurant where everything happens and physics don't really matter, and nothing actually in this film felt like an actual location. It felt like almost the entire film was shot in front of a green screen. And it makes sense because you have a guy and a lot of people in this film who have made their living of acting in front of green screens. A lot of, there's part of that is that there's kind of this fun bit where there's a ton of Marvel guys showing up as bounty hunters trying to take down the Taxman. You have Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan and Ryan Reynolds and Tim Blake Nelson, all people we've seen in Marvel movies showing up trying to take down the Taxman. And I don't want to tell you how it pans out, but it's kind of fun. But it's also like, yeah, sure, just stand in front of this green screen, guys. Next guy come in. You're only getting 2 minutes per scene. Ana de Armas, I thought, was surprisingly adaptable in this. We don't see her in a lot of action films. And I thought her ability to handle the action in this movie kind of made me a little less apprehensive about the upcoming Ballerina, John Wick spinoff series that she is starring in. And Adrian Brody, despite the fact that I don't really like him as an actor, he's born to be a mustache-twirling villain, and he very much is a Dick Dastardly type character in this movie, kind of a bumbling villain, but I enjoyed him in this. I felt that the movie was better as a rom-com than it was an action movie. Unfortunately, it's 90% action movie, 10% rom-com. And it's the 90% is a pretty bad action flick in my mind. And the chemistry between the two leads is actually really weak, which surprised me. It felt like they were trying to make The Lost City, the Channing Tatum, Sandra Bullock film, which was surprisingly good. It's a movie that's filled with spy cliches to the point where I wondered if this was just trying to be a parody of a spy movie. And really, the CGI scenery, that rotating restaurant at the end, was a real mess. And Chris Evans, like him as an actor, I think most people really enjoy Chris Evans, but I feel like he's made some rough, really mediocre action movies recently. This and The Gray Man on Netflix from last year, which was pretty terrible. He's an actor who is showing through this that charm and good looks can only carry you so far if you're just choosing terrible scripts. And unfortunately, he is doing just that. I did not care for Ghosted, despite the fact of enjoying everyone in the movie separately outside of this. This movie was a real dog, and I ended up giving Ghosted 1.5 out of 5 stars. Don't waste your time on this thing. Find other much better spy action movies or other movies starring these people. They've made much better ones. The last movie I have, though, on my streaming spotlight, this is a week of weird movies, man. I mean, Beau is Afraid was like several fever dreams that I was constantly waking up from. This next one is another really odd film. It's a film called Smoking Causes Coughing. It's from director Quentin Dupieux, French filmmaker. This is a French film. He's the filmmaker of one of my favorite absurd movies, a film called Deerskin that came out in 2019 starring Jean Dujardin, about a guy who finds a suede leather jacket with fringe, and the jacket starts telling him to do evil things, and it's absurd, and I loved it. And he also made another absurd film called Rubber about a car tire that goes on a killing spree through a town. This is the mind of what we're getting here. Just watching this while I'm talking, oh man. He's got a wild sense of humor that really tickles me in the right way. And this one features the Tobacco Force, a Power Ranger-ish team of heroes in goofy outfits, fighting monsters such as a giant rubber turtle that they defeat in the beginning of the movie. And their mission is to teach kids not to smoke. But their powers and their names are all tobacco cigarette related. They all are named after different parts of cigarettes, and their powers to destroy the villains are to give them cancer. They shoot things out of their hands that give the villains cancer and then make them explode in the most gory, crazy way that sends blood and guts for dozens of feet out, and it's wild, gory stuff. But this film this team actually is starting to lose chemistry, and their boss, who you saw in the trailer here, is a rat puppet who communicates with them via the video screen in their 1970s era van, their boss decides to send them on a team building retreat because they've got to get the chemistry back before they decide to go out and take down the big villain Lizardo. And so this rat named Didier, who is a puppet with this goo dripping out of his mouth that's never explained why. He also has a proclivity to always have a new lady lusting after him. He doesn't expect that this retreat is going to devolve into a series of stories that these characters start to tell, and others who even wander into the resort start to tell. And it starts with some telling like ghost stories that get crazy. They go nowhere, and they're not even really stories for the most part, but they're wild. Each story gets interrupted by another person saying, oh, that reminds me of a story too. And there's no real point to any of it. And that's the crazy part, is none of it really ties together for any real reason. There's not a lot of team bonding going on here, but they play it all so seriously, and I was laughing out loud watching this. There's a story that a fish tells that ends in hilarious abruptness. There's over-the-top gore for no reason. There's a disturbing story about a boy in a wood chipper it's weird. But there's some strange, brilliant ideas in here. Like the team opens up the refrigerator. It's a grocery store inside the refrigerator. I love it. And a lot of times it felt to me like this was like a movie made like Mel Brooks on acid, the absurdity of it. Like, what's the deal with this rat? What's his deal? What's the ooze coming from his mouth? At one point we're told maybe it's detergent, maybe it's acid. I don't know, who cares? Why is every female drawn to this puppet rat with ooze? I don't know. But what I do know is I really enjoyed this film. I laughed out loud. I will see everything that this filmmaker makes because so far he's 3 for 3 with me. And I can't wait to rewatch this film. This is one of those that I feel like I'll be picking up a bunch of new things on rewatch because I wasn't sure what was going on the first time, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. So Smoking Causes Coughing, I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Fun stuff. Can't wait to rewatch it. Let's take a look ahead, though, at some films that are coming soon to a theater or streaming device near you. I'm looking at the weekend of May 5th. Some people call that Cinco de Mayo. And that weekend, we have one huge movie coming out in the movie theaters that is going to dominate everything. It is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. What is most likely, I think positively, going to be the final chapter in the Guardians of the Galaxy story. I am hit or miss on these Marvel movies of late, but I love the Guardians of the Galaxy films. They're always so much fun, and every time I see this trailer, I get melancholy because I don't want the fun to end. I like hanging out with these people, but that is coming out May 5th. And then over on streaming on Netflix, we have a film called Sanctuary, which is a film starring Christopher Abbott and Margaret Qualley about a dominatrix and her client and the disaster that occurs when he attempts to end their relationship. We showed this one at the Wisconsin Film Festival last week. Heard good things. So I'm excited for that. That'll be over on Netflix. Before we move any further, though, I want to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, The Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for being the sponsor for this program. Oh, these 9 years we've been together. It's been great. I do appreciate everyone there. I love giving shout outs to the folks over there. Zenon, I know you're watching, man. You're the best. You're the best in the biz. I'm happy every time I see you over there. Great representative for the Palace. So we thank you again. And a huge shout out to those who have had a hand in this show getting this far. My old host, Mike Roth, got to chat with him this week. Missed him. But everyone involved who gets this show up and running, I have to always give our old pal, Mara Trusty, a shout out for making this program happen every single week. Next week, though, I am finally going to be joined by somebody so I can take a break from doing all the talking. I'm going to have Steve Sabatke here. We're going to talk about some fun movies. We have the Judy Blume movie, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. We're also going to talk about the Judy Blume Forever documentary that just came out. We're going to be talking about the Disney Plus film Peter Pan and Wendy. We're going to be talking about the theatrical film Polite Society. And Steve is going to give you his thoughts on a documentary that he saw at the Film Fest about the rock band The Zombies. So stay tuned for all that. I can't wait to hear about this documentary. So I look forward to you joining us next week. But until that time, I have been Jameson. Thank you for watching.